Hello, Metallian Magic here, and today we are going to be cracking our first pack of Journey into Nyx. This is one of the packs that I won during one of the pre-releases that I attended over pre-release weekend, and I had a lot of fun. I played a deck on that day that had both Elspeth and Karanos God of Storms in it, so that was pretty sweet. But what I'm going to do today is open this pack up since the set is brand new and it hasn't even been released out in stores yet at the time of this filming. And because its official store release date is May 2nd, which is this coming Friday as of this filming date. So first I'm just going to open the pack and slow roll the cards and we'll see what's in here. And then after I lay them out, I'm going to discuss what I might first pick out of this pack, as Journey into Nyx will become the first pack in the Theros block draft format upon its release. So got Market Festival, Rotted Hulk, Hubris, which is quite good, Pensive Minotaur, which is quite funny, a Crowan Mastiff, Nature's Panoply, Blood Crazed Hoplite, also quite good, Oreskos Swiftclaw, a nice efficient beater, Warwing Siren, so there's some good commons in this pack. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have a foil in this pack because we have 9 commons right here, so that's sweet. Spite of Mogus, our first uncommon. Blinding Flare, our second uncommon. Let me just move these up a little bit. Okay. Swarmborn Giant. Ooh, and our rare is Mana Confluence, which I would not first pick in a draft unless I wanted the money value, because this card is quite sought after, and right now it's one of the most valuable cards in the set as of the pre-release weekend. So certainly from a financial perspective, just picking this up and sort of paying for your draft would not be something that I would knock you too hard for. But if we're gonna look at this pack strictly from a strategy and like, you know, this is like a money draft, or a draft where you have like serious prizes on the line, like a day 2 of a GP style draft or something, I would not pick the Mana Confluence. However, like I said, I wouldn't fault you for picking it due to its value. And our foil, oh, we got a foil rare. Not a card that I'm super in love with, but I mean, foil rares are sweet. I'll hold that a little closer so you can see it's Dictate of the Twin Gods, and that looks really cool. It's sort of very similar to Furnace of Wrath, except it has Flash. I think the converted mana cost, I'm not sure if it's the same, but so that's pretty sweet. Looks really cool, and foil rare and a Mana Confluence in the same pack. Very, very cool. And a basic Plains and a bird token. All right. So this is not an obvious pick, and at least I don't think it is. And I'm going to be basing my assessments here on what I already know about the format pre-Journey into Nyx. I don't think Journey into Nyx is going to change Theros block draft too much. Constellation is certainly an interesting mechanic that I saw being quite powerful at times at the pre-releases. Sealed is obviously a little bit different than draft. But I see a couple of cards, more than a couple actually, that are potential first picks here, and I want to discuss my thoughts regarding those cards. So first, just to get it out of the way, I think Mana Confluence is not really necessary. It's not really a card that you're excited to play in draft, mostly because the mana fixing, if you're playing a 2-color deck, won't be super important. It could come into play at times, but paying 1 life, especially when there are some really strong aggressive decks in, like, I'd only want to play this if I am one of those aggressive decks like Red, White, Heroic, and being the first pick in the draft, you don't know what type of deck you're going to be at. Like I said, if you're picking it because it's currently worth a good amount of money, and you want to take it for that value, then especially if it's a draft that you are paying money, you know, to enter, which assumingly it is, then I don't see that as an unreasonable line of thinking. But let's take that out of the equation for the minute. And just look at cards that we could take based on building a winning deck. So the first card I want to talk about is Hubris. Hubris is very similar to Voyage's End from Theros. So it costs the same, a blue and a white. A blue and a colorless. It's an instant. Return target creature and all auras attached to it to their owner's hands. So it doesn't allow you to scry, but obviously in a format where people are building up heroes with +1/+1 counters and bestowing creatures onto other creatures and making these big Voltron monsters, or monstrosing their creatures to get the monstrous effect and making these big, huge creatures, being able to reset that, bounce is very good in this format. Sometimes returning all auras is going to be an upside. Sometimes you might even want to do that to reset your own bestows and re-bestow them. Other times, though, it's going to be kind of a downside. Other times, it'll allow your opponent potentially to reapply some of their effects. I think that's a niche scenario, though. More often than not, it's going to provide you the tempo that you need, and it'll probably be best in a slightly aggressive tempo-based deck, like a white-blue heroic deck. So I definitely think this is a reasonable first pick. I like a Crow and Mastiff. I don't think I would first pick it here, just because tapping it and a white to tap target creature is, I think, very good in this format, again, to be able to lock down these big built-up creatures that your opponent has put a lot of resources into. But I think there are other things in this pack. Being that I haven't drafted with Journey into Nyx yet, I'm just not sure if that's worth taking over some of these other cards. And being able to tap a creature down is important tempo, but so is being able to return it. I think Hubris has more upside, although you can keep reusing a Crow and Mastiff over and over, although 2/2 does die to a lot of damage-based removal, as well as pretty much all the damage-based removal I can think of in the block, except Spark Jolt and like Scouring Sands and stuff like that. So that's something to consider. I actually really like Blood Crazed Hoplite, and I'm wondering if Journey is going to add some black cards to the mix that will make a more aggressive black heroic deck possible. Previously, black aggressive decks usually paired with red, and occasionally, if you were fortunate, contained many Minotaurs and could leverage that synergy. But a lot of the black decks that I had seen prior to Journey being released were more grindy or control-based decks, or decks that had sort of a long game plan with things like Scholar of Athreos or Servant of Timoret or Timoret. I think it's Timoret. But I think there's some cards like Gnarled Scarhide, which is an uncommon, and this guy, Blood Crazed Hoplite, in Journey that might make a black-white heroic deck a more black-white aggressive, or even other sort of black X decks leveraging some heroic creatures like Tormented Hero from back in Theros more viable. And this is a card that I really like. It's a 2/1 for 2. It has heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Blood Crazed Hoplite, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then whenever a +1/+1 counter is placed on Blood Crazed Hoplite, remove a +1/+1 counter from target creature an opponent controls. So there are a lot of effects in this block that add +1/+1 counters to creatures. There are going to be times where his second ability is a boon to you, but I think more often than not, it's just sort of, cards that have heroic and the +1/+1 counter ability when heroic is triggered have been very good in this format. And if black is able to be paired with another color, perhaps white, in a more aggressive strategy, I think this card is going to be quite good for that strategy. Since I'm not sure if that's going to be where I want to be, I'm not sure I would first pick this going in blind to my first Journey-born Theros draft, but I think it's one to watch. I'm still at the moment going, through this far, going to pick Hubris, but I like the Swiftclaw. I wouldn't first pick it. It's a 3/1 vanilla creature for 2. It's an efficient beater, but I don't think I'm going to first pick that. I like it a lot, but I'm not going to first pick it over Hubris, or, even though this is another blue card, Warwing Siren. And I'm really not too concerned about passing Hubris or Warwing if I take one or the other, because those are the only 2 blue cards in the pack. I'm not, and there are good cards in other colors in this pack, like the Mastiff and the Swiftclaw and the Hoplite. So I don't think passing one blue card is going to assuredly put my neighbor into blue. But early in the draft, too, I think, first pick, I usually just try to take the card that positions me the best in the draft, which can be speculative. It pretty much always is, but this is kind of being called the blue Wingsteed rider. It's not exactly the same, obviously. It costs 2 colorless and a blue, so only 1 colored mana, versus Wingsteed Rider's colorless and 2 white. And it's flying and heroic. It gets a +1/+1 counter when you cast a spell that targets it, and it starts out as a 1/3. So instead of a 2/2 like Wingsteed Rider, it's a 1/3, but an evasive creature that has the +1/+1 counter heroic ability, especially since white-blue heroic is already a good combination, and this card can give you another potentially growing evasive flyer in that color combination. Seems very strong to me, so this would definitely be under consideration as well. One other card I want to talk about, well, briefly before I talk about the last potential pick, although this one's kind of risky. Blinding Flare I like a lot as a strive card. That's kind of a falter effect. Any number of target creatures can't block, where it costs 1, and then you can strive it for 1 more red as many times as you want or can to target additional creatures. But because the strive cost is red, you're going to have to be heavy red to make this work. If you only have 3 mountains in play, then you're only going to be able to target 3 creatures, 3 red sources or whatever. The heavy colored requirement is something that turns me off from first picking it. But I do think later in the pack, if you see one of these and you've decided that you're going to be a heavy red aggressive deck, then picking up a Blinding Flare a bit later in the pack would certainly not be a bad pick. I wouldn't first pick it, though. Swarmborn Giant is interesting. I've heard lots of different opinions on this card. I don't think I'm going to first pick it over the Hoplite, the Siren, the Hubris, or the Mastiff. And its drawback is very real. Whenever you're dealt combat damage, sacrifice Swarmborn Giant. It is a 6/6 for 4 that can become an 8/8 for 6 when you monstrous it. And when it becomes monstrous, it has reach. So there are going to be games where you're able to sort of ramp into this with like a Voyaging Satyr or a Golden Hind or a Font of Fertility and play this on turn 3, and it's potentially going to be very difficult for your opponent to win that game. However, I think that it's a hard card to evaluate. Listening to the Limited Resources podcast with Marshall Sutcliffe and Brian Wong, they kind of had a bit of a gap between what each person thought about this card. I believe Brian liked it better than Marshall. It's a very aggressive card, and it certainly has strong upside, but I would be reluctant to first pick this because of the times where you're in a situation where you're behind and your opponent has an evasive creature, or your opponent is able to play something like God's Willing, or any number of combat tricks like aerial formation in the new set that makes their creatures evasive. And I think there are too many ways that you can get blown out by playing this card and then just basically it going to the graveyard without it really doing anything. Obviously it can block right after it comes into play, but like I said, if they have an evasive creature and they just fly over it and get damage in, then it's pretty much, it did nothing but wasted your mana. So it has high upside, but I'm not first picking it. And then Dictate of the Twin Gods is a cool card, but I wouldn't first pick it, partially because I don't think it's really a build around me card. It could be if you get the right pool together with a lot of direct damage, but it's not one-sided. It says if a source would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. So that goes for you and your opponent. And I think you most want to use this card kind of like a combat trick, where you attack, and maybe they're at a high enough life total that they think they can take it, they don't block, and then you flash this in because it has flash, can be played anytime you could play an instant, and deal double the damage they expected. Let's say they're at 16, and you attack for 8. And they're like, well, I'm going to go down to 8, but I have a good crackback, or I have, some effects to gain me life. Like I'll bestow a Hopeful Eidolon onto one of my creatures next turn and swing in. And perhaps they think, oh, I'll take it. And then you flash this in and kill them. It's a niche scenario, but it'll probably come up, more than never. And there are going to be some times where it just wins a game like that. But if it sticks around, the fact that it gives both players the same, I guess you could call it upside or downside depending on what the game state is it seems like a very high variance card to me based on the situation and the game state. And also, I want to see more of the packs that are being passed around the table before I go in on red, seeing as how none of the cards in this pack in red are worth first picking. This is very mana intensive in colored mana. Like I said, this is an effect that applies to both players that could potentially be a downside for you. This, I just don't think really does much in draft. I feel like this is sort of more of a potential synergistic constructed card. Perhaps in a certain type of sealed pool, this could be very good, but unless you get enough instants or sorceries to really make this worth it, there are times where it's just going to, like... It's also a sorcery, so it can't be cast at instant speed. I'm not a big fan of this in draft. And a 2/3 for 3 with just flavor text is not something I want to be first picking. So, to recap, and I want to hear your opinions out there, because seeing as how I have not yet drafted with this set, my first draft with this set is going to be this Friday, actually, this coming Friday. Based on what I know about the format already, there's some cards that I like, but I want to see what the viewers out there would do with this pack. So I think probably I'd have a hard time deciding between Hubris and Warwing Siren. I think I would go with Hubris because there are a lot of good evasive creatures in all three sets. Effects like this, while also more plentiful than they would be in some sets, are quite powerful, and starting out the draft with a big tempo card like this is something that I like to do, especially in a pack like this where there aren't any huge bombs begging to be drafted. I like these two cards a lot too, the Blood Crazed Hoplite and the Akroan Mastiff. I think I would probably put them in this order, where I would go Hubris 1, Warwing Siren 2, Blood Crazed Hoplite 3, and Akroan Mastiff 4. So let me know what you guys would do. And let me just reiterate that because this pack isn't super powerful, like, I don't see any cards, that just scream bomb. There's nothing in here that's just like, oh man, Windmill Slam first pick. So if you were to take the Mana Confluence because of its financial value, this is actually a pretty good pack to do it. It's not like there's a card that's begging to be drafted out of this pack. If you just draft a card for money value, it's, the best you can hope for is to do it in a pack where you're not giving up a whole lot of opportunity in card power in order to do so. So that's an option. But again, from a play perspective, disregarding financial considerations, I think I would go with Hubris, Warring Siren, Blood Crazed Hoplite, and Akroan Mastiff in that order. But like I said, I haven't drafted with the set yet. So I'm the kind of player that gets better at evaluating a set once I have experience with the format and once I actually get a chance to play the cards and interact with other cards and to get into game situations and scenarios and evaluate cards with some playtesting under my belt. So let me know in the comments below what you would do. And as always, thanks for watching. This is Metallian Magic, signing out.